Okay, so once again, I'd just like to introduce myself. My name is Jocelyn Whalen, pronouns she, her. I'm the Resource Center Facilitator with the Kawartha World Issues Center. I'm coming to you live today from the Quick Eye Center, which stands for Education, Youth, and the Environment. Lovely to see you all today. I'm so happy you came. This is going to be a really incredible event. Like I said, it is recorded, so we can watch it later, and it will be posted on our social media. So what is COP? COP is a conference of the parties. It's the annual United National Conference on Climate Change that takes place in a different city each year. This year was the 26th COP, or COP26. It's been 5 years since COP21 in Paris, where the Paris Agreement was created. It was decided that every 5 years since Paris, countries would come forward with new targets and ambitions. COP26 was meant to take place last year, but was delayed to the COVID-19 pandemic. Since the last COP, climate change has continued to intensify, and the effects have become more evident worldwide. I'd be amiss to not mention the current events in British Columbia that are happening with washouts and extreme rainfall amounts. This could be related to climate change, as some people are alluding to. And I just want to say that my thoughts are with everyone that's affected by that and affected by climate change across the globe. So why are we here today? Today we're here to have a reflective panel discussion on COP26 with youth activists who attended and participated in the event. And we'd like to break down what happened at COP and the next steps moving forward. So I hope that you can get some takeaways from today's event. Okay, let's go. So first of all, I would like to introduce Sarah Lewis, who pronouns she, her, and Quay. Sarah is the digital communication specialist for Quick. She is an Ojibwe Cree mother, poet, social justice activist, and dreamer. She grew up and is from Curve Lake First Nation, as well as Pukatawagan, Manitoba. She graduated from Trent University and with a Bachelor of Social Work in the Honors Program. She is also the current Peterborough Poet Laureate. She has worked at numerous agencies in Nogo-Jiwanong, including the Nogo-Jiwanong Friendship Center, the Elizabeth Fry Society, and the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center. She is a counselor, community program event organizer and facilitator, and bail court program worker. Sarah, I'd just like to ask if you could please start us off in a good way with a land acknowledgement and some opening words.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. My computer was glitching a little bit, so I just wanted to make sure that everyone can hear me okay and it's not pausing or glitching. Good. Okay. Great. Thank you. Yeah, huge bio. I love it. So yeah, I just wanted to, as Jocelyn mentioned, I think it's good to always start off with a land acknowledgement. So just acknowledging that we are in fact on stolen land, and that is a part of the traditional territory of the Mississauga peoples, which is the land covered by Treaty 20. So this includes 7 First Nations, and the closest ones that are nearest to Trent would be like Hiawatha, Curve Lake, Alderville, and Scugog. As mentioned before, I'm from Curve Lake, and yeah, I think it's really important that we do these acknowledgements because it's the first and primary step in terms of reconciliation and sort of commitment to restoring the relationship with the First Peoples here, and yeah, recreating what that relationship looks like, especially for agencies like Quick and members of Nogo-Jiwanong or Peterborough. So yeah, thank you very much, and I'm super excited for this panel discussion. Thanks, Jocelyn.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sarah. So I'd like to introduce, I would actually like our panelists to introduce themselves. So starting with Malika Collette, would you like to give us a little brief bio, just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jocelyn. And so great to see everyone today. I hope you can hear me okay. My name is Malika. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Lakefield, but I'm currently calling in from London, England, and I'll be home next week back in Peterborough. So I attended COP and I was involved in organizing mock COP26 last year, which was a virtual youth run version of COP that myself and some other youth organized internationally. And my activism first got started after I participated in the YLS program. So great to see all of you here. So that's a little bit about me. I'm on a gap year right now. I graduated Adam Scott last year. I'll pass it over to Phoebe.
Thank you very much. I'm Phoebe. As you can probably tell by my voice, I am not from Canada. I'm from the UK. I'm calling in from just a little bit up north from where Malika is. And I was also involved in mock COP26 last year, which is that youth version of COP and like the climate conference type thing. And I do a couple of other things, mostly on like how we communicate the climate crisis in the media and like the newspapers and on TV, and working with young people and facilitating sessions with young people to make sure that we understand what the climate crisis is. So I think I grew up not understanding it at all. So yeah, that's me. I'm 20 years old, my pronouns are she, her, and yeah, that's me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Malika and Phoebe. We are so happy to have you here. And both are coming from United Kingdom. Both are in England right now. So that's pretty incredible that we can facilitate these discussions internationally. And also, more or less, both of our panelists are here. They're at COP26, and we're involved in some sort of capacity. So I am just so looking forward to discussing this more with the both of you. And I'm so grateful that you're here today and so grateful that everyone is here today. So let's get started. So I'm just going to ask questions to Malika and Phoebe and give them a few minutes to answer. We can rotate between questions, or if you both do feel compelled to answer a question, if it's a good one, then please feel free to, because I'd like both of your opinions on everything. So let's get started with Malika. I'd like to ask you, how did you begin with climate activism? And the second part of the question is, how has it influenced your life?
Yeah, it's a great question. So like I mentioned, YLS definitely played a role. And before that, I kind of grew up spending time in nature and connecting with the land in different ways, and just growing up aware of climate change and the different issues going on. But I think it was really in 2018, 2019, when the youth movement started to grow around the world, that I felt inspired to get more involved and to start doing more, as well as seeing the increase in disasters happening all around the world fueled by climate change. So that's when I joined YLS and became more involved, joining different groups, both locally and internationally, such as Mock COP. And I think youth play a really large role, and especially here at COP, just seeing the number of youth present. There wasn't a lot of youth inside the negotiation spaces, but outside of them, you could see the presence of youth and the presence of the people really having that space and taking up that space, whether that was on the streets or in protest just outside of the gate to enter. There was protests happening daily, and I think the youth really do have a big impact on that. So yeah, climate activism has definitely influenced my way in just shaping what I do and what I believe in, and kind of who I am as a person. So yeah, that's all that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Phoebe, would you also like to answer that question?
Of course. Yeah, so I got involved, I don't know how old I was probably like 14, 15, and I was kind of exactly the opposite and also exactly the same as what Malika has just said. I grew up not really being an outdoorsy person. I'm not really a nature person. I did not grow up like that. I grew up knowing nothing about climate change. I grew up not being engaged in it whatsoever. The turning point for me was Greta Thunberg. It was the protests that I was seeing happening not only in the UK, but everywhere in the world. And it was seeing, for the first time ever, really climate crisis being given like a place in the news, and being like seeing all of the things that were happening, and then seeing that one little line at the end of it, which is always just one line, which it should never have been just one line, but that one little line that was like, this is because of climate change and it's only going to get worse. And just thinking about it and reading about it and seeing people who cared so much, not only young people who are going to be affected in the future, but people that are being affected right now, people across the global south, people who are being affected by this in the present day, seeing that and seeing that it was not only a crisis of saving the planet and saving the trees and saving whatever. It's not just like saving the planet, it's saving people. The planet will survive no matter what we do. The planet will recover. People won't. People are dying. People are suffering. People are losing their livelihoods. And it was seeing that and seeing the emphasis of that that brought me into this. And I think when you ask the question of how has it influenced my life, it's in that exact way. It's what me and Malika and what young people across the world are fighting for, what everybody across the world is fighting for, is it's not for the planet. It is for the planet, but it's not for the planet. It's for people, and it's for love, and it's for friendships, and it's for the connections and the communities and the things that we care about on the everyday basis, and the things that you're doing in that classroom there. Like that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for those connections. And I think for me, being a climate activist and meeting people from across the world, like we are right now, it's getting to know cultures from across the world and getting to understand them and getting to love them and getting to integrate them into the way that I live my life, and to protect that, and to constantly think on a daily basis, what I'm doing right now is a luxury and this is at risk, and what I'm doing, like that, having that constantly in your head, and knowing how precious and special the connections are, and those like connections of people are, is amazing. And that's what climate change activism has done for me, I think.
That is so beautiful. Thank you so much. So the next question is, what is COP and what does it mean to you? Malika, did you want to start us off on this one as well, please?
Sure. Yeah, I think you gave a bit of intro to COP at the start, but yeah, so it's the annual United Nations conference that happens every year on climate change and has taken place for the last 26 years in different cities. So it's where world leaders come together, ministers, environment ministers come together, and there's negotiations, there's speeches, there's side events, and all kinds of different things that happen in this one or two main venues around this area. So to me, I think really being there this year and seeing firsthand how it takes place and, kind of what really happens. So I think we often think about it as like, this is a big summit where the action is taking place. But I think more and more we're seeing that this isn't where the action is going to come from. The action is going to come from the people outside of those buildings. It's not going to come from those men in suits walking by you and just rushing to their next negotiation, because to be completely honest, that's who the most of the people are in there. I was super surprised how few young people there were represented in the space, and how it was genuinely just middle-aged people in suits walking by you all day and rushing off to their next meeting. So I think to me, COP represents something that has been happening for years, but also has so much to change. Like, it's hard to put into words, but it's an event that's been happening, and yes, it has made progress. Yes, it has got the Paris Agreement, but I think it represents a space where many people are not welcome, where a lot of greenwashing and youth washing happens. And I think that there's a long way to go to get COP to where it really needs to be, because it's not seeing the ambition and the real commitments that need to be happening at these kind of events. So I think it's much more of a diplomatic process than it is the real action. And that's just something that I really experienced being there firsthand and seeing what is actually happening in these rooms and where is the real action coming from. And I believe, and the young people really can see that the action's not happening in those rooms, but outside of them.
Thank you so much for your honest answer, Malika. And this is why it is so important for youth to be there on the ground to see what's happening in these types of organizations and in these types of situations. So I'm so happy you were both there. And I'm so happy that from what I've heard, there was a large youth presence this year at COP26 outside of the actual meetings. I saw the protest, just, yeah, very happy that both of you took part in that. Phoebe, did you want to answer that question, or do you have anything to add?
Yeah, of course. I think COP is, above all, it's a negotiation platform. It's nothing particularly, like, it's important and it's so important, but it's nothing particularly exciting. It's a lot of words on a page, and it's a lot of like the middle-aged men talking at each other across a table and trying to make decisions that are literally like where a comma is in a sentence. That is what COP is. But over the last couple of years, and particularly this year, because partially we've had that year to build momentum because it was cancelled for a year, it's postponed. So we've had that year to build up momentum. So what COP was this year, it was that negotiation platform, but it was also side events, and it was also the youth presence, and it was the civil society presence, and it was everything that was going on outside of it, which I would also consider to be COP. Like COP for me, the actual conference, the actual negotiation platform, I'm kind of moving on to the next question here, but what actually happened within those negotiations, like within those four walls, was so disappointing to me, and it was so soul crushing in a way to see it happen in front of you. You understand, I think, as a young person, that you are not being reflected in these spaces, and how unambitious and how like unurgent, how not urgent those spaces are. But when you actually go in there and you see it with your own two eyes, you see what is going on, and you see everything within that space, you kind of have a bit of an existential crisis again. You have that kind of, oh, okay, yeah, amazing, yeah, amazing. So for me, what COP meant to me was everything that went on outside of that conference center. I learned so much about how the institutions that I should not trust and should not put all of my faith into to solve this crisis. I learned that within those four walls. But outside of it, I learned strength, and I learned community, and I learned how to build a coalition with people from backgrounds that are so wildly different from the ones that I grew up in, and experiences that are so wildly different from the ones I grew up in. So I mean, if I were to reflect on COP26, that's what I got out of it. I got out of it meeting people like Malika that I've known online for years, but never actually seen in my country and on the other side of the ocean, you know, like that's what I got out of it. It was seeing people and meeting people and being able to like strategize and coalition build and community build and sit in those little like coffee shop basements and just in like at random tables. So actually sat on the floor in corridors and trying to plan things for the next couple of years and plan what we were going to do. That was the real value in COP for me. It was okay, we've seen how bad the system is. How do we build from that? Like who are our allies here? Like within that system, how can we like build on that? How can we do things within time? How can we make sure that youth are being included in those spaces? You know, it was the people that made COP this year, not the negotiations, because the negotiations were a little bit like a like a deflated balloon.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I'm seeing a lot of themes here of community building outside of the meetings, outside of COP26 itself. But Phoebe, I like how you talked about how that's COP26 to you, the more of the solidarity movements, the connections with youth, the protest, what's happening outside. And I agree, that's more of a focus of mine as well. And once again, just so happy that you were there to take part in that. Malika, do you have anything else to reflect on COP26 and your experiences?
Yeah, just like adding on what Phoebe said, I think like for me, the real value is like those connections and those people that we were able to connect with. Like, yeah, like Phoebe said, we genuinely just met new friends and sat in the hallway one day for lunch, because that, like, we just kind of formed those connections. Or it would be going to a strike with new people, or planning an action inside the blue zone minutes before it happened, and just kind of those spur of the moment, but those actions and those connections that you just don't have elsewhere. And I recognize that privilege in being able to be there. And it's just being able to connect with so many other young activists from all around the world, you know, meeting these people from Kenya and Nigeria that we've worked with, and just being able to form these connections. I think for so many young people, what COP really means for us is to hold those in power accountable. We know we're not going into that expecting major life-changing outcomes from COP, but we have to be there, and we need young people there every year to hold them accountable and to show them that the youth are still watching them. So I think that was kind of a big role that the youth played, especially this year, whether they were inside or outside, the youth were there to hold them accountable. And so I think for me, that was a big part of being there, and just being there with the other youth, standing in solidarity with all of them, and organizing and listening and watching in whatever capacity that we could.
Yeah, that's incredible. A lot of the most largest movements in history were started by youth. And I think that this is part of it as well, just as climate activism and youth involvement. I just think it's one of the most wonderful things I've seen. And I know that it's building momentum across the world with youth. So very happy about that. The next questions are kind of revolving around COP26 as well. So what did you hope would be some of the outcomes of COP26? How is your experience? So that's more in relation to some of the negotiations. So I don't know if either one of you want to speak on that, of any of the negotiations that took part between the world leaders and just different outcomes of COP26 in general. Phoebe, did you want to start us off if you have anything to add to that?
So what I hoped for from COP26 was a little bit different to what actually came out of it, like policy-wise and like negotiation-wise. So what I hoped for and what we needed was like, so you know, we have this like 1.5 degrees. We have that thing that would be safe at 1.5 degrees. In a sense, 2 degrees, but mostly 1.5. We need to keep 1.5 alive and in sight. So what I wanted from COP was really a universal commitment to that 1.5 degree target, because how it works is because of the Paris Agreement, every 5 years, they kind of like have a little bit of a rethink and a little bit of a like look back on what they've been doing for the last 5 years and be like, have a little renegotiate and a little like restructure of what they're doing. So this would have been the perfect time for them to change the Paris Agreement from just a little suggestion of 1.5, a little suggestion of 2 degrees to like, we need to hit this. We need, like, this is a binding commitment. You need to do this. It would have been a very good time to do that. They didn't take that opportunity, but it would have been a very good time to do it. 1.5 degrees is so important. And that's something that we really prioritized when we did Mock COP. When we did Mock COP26, that kind of youth climate version, the youth version of COP, we had like a load of young people acting as delegates for their countries and then voting on this big treaty. And one of the treaty policy asks was that each country's plans and programs and laws are going to be fully aligned with the calls to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees. And that is not something that we saw by the adults. The adults did not do that. The adults did the exact opposite of that. The collection of like national commitments, like we call them NDCs, so like what each country is going to do to get closer to net zero and get closer to carbon neutral. Those, if you combine them all together as a global force, will only go to 2.4 degrees. So not even that like little 2 degree thing. It's 2.4, which is like almost a whole degree above where we need to be. And that is awful. It's a little bit better than it was. It was at 2.7, now it's at 2.4, but that's still a bit shocking. It's still not great. So that's really what I wanted. I wanted that universal commitment to 1.5. I also wanted an immediate commitment to phase out coal and to phase out fossil fuels as a whole. So not only coal, but also oil and gas and other fossil fuels, which was something that we really quite desperately needed. And you might have seen in the news, there was a lot of kerfuffle about that. There was a lot of issues about in the Glasgow Declaration, what is it called? Glasgow Climate Pact. Is that what they settled on? The Glasgow Climate Pact. What that said was basically they were going to have the words coal phase out, and then right at the end, like at the last little second, India came in, supported by a lot of other countries, came in to say that they wanted to change that language from phase out to phase down, which is obviously a little bit less ambitious, which is very disappointing. We need not only coal phase out as the language in there, we also need oil and gas phase out. We also need to stop the subsidies of fossil fuels, to stop governments allowing fossil fuel companies to have tax breaks, stop fossil fuel companies from getting away with a lot of things. And we also need commitments from those countries that are polluting, that are the big polluters, to increase their funding to support countries that haven't contributed to this crisis, like countries in the global south that are facing those effects right now. We needed finance to go to them to be able to adapt to what's happening and adapt to the things that they're seeing right now, but also to try and cut their own emissions, because these are countries that are trying to develop. Those are countries that are trying to industrialize and trying to compete on the global scale economically. And they are trying to do that in the same way that we did that as developed countries, developed in inverted commas. They're trying to do that on the lines of fossil fuels, because that's the only way that we know how. And that's the only way that the economy that we have globally is dependent on that. So in order to stop them from doing that, in order to stop them from having to be reliant on those fossil fuels to be able to develop, to be able to industrialize, to be able to compete with us, and to be able to pull themselves out of COVID-19 as a pandemic, as a crisis, we need to give them, as polluting countries, the finance to be able to do that, and the finance to be able to restructure, rebuild their economy from COVID along the lines of carbon neutrality, along the lines of net zero. And we didn't do that really either. There was a little bit, there was a little whisper of that. There was a lot of things that was going on that Malika can probably go into more detail on, but we had this target for climate finance, and it's good. It's not great, but it's goodish. It could have been worse. But yeah, that's a garbled thing. I wanted 1.5, I didn't get 1.5. We got 2.4, which is absolutely awful. I wanted fossil fuel phase out. I got coal phase down, which is a step, but it's not a leap, and it's not what we need. It's not the urgency with which we need it. I wanted climate finance. We kind of got it, kind of didn't, which is the theme of COP. If you haven't picked that one up, it's COP this year. People describe it as goodish, but I think I would rather call it was bad, but it could have been a lot worse. It wasn't that it was good and it could have been better. It was bad. It could have been so much worse. And I think that's the kind of theme that we need to go down. It's that COP, it wasn't necessarily a failure, but it also wasn't necessarily a success. There was a lot of things that we could have gotten from it that we didn't. Malika, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what you've said. Like the phase down and to the 1.5 are definitely two of the really main takeaways that I think they seem like such a bare minimum, and yet they weren't achieved. Like we've been talking about 1.5 for so long, and we've been talking about, we all know fossil fuels is a cause, and yet this is the first time they've actually named fossil fuels in the text. And it's not even phase out completely, it's phase down. So seeing those things that seem like such bare minimum to addressing climate change in these legal documents that aren't even being reached is really frustrating and disappointing. And I think another thing is just like whose voices are being listened to, right? I watched the closing plenary where this agreement was agreed upon. And you hear the nations from the global south speaking up and saying how, well, we'll agree to this because we simply have no other choice, right? They had to compromise for this agreement, but meanwhile, they're the ones that are already experiencing this. And then it's the other countries that are being listened to and forcing these compromises to happen. So I think it's really thinking about who's making this agreement happen, who's forcing these kind of compromises, especially when it's millions of lives that are being affected in other countries. And another outcome that many people have been talking about that we didn't see is the loss and damage. So the loss and damage fund was something that people were really hopeful was going to come through this COP, which would have been $100 billion that would go to those already experiencing the effects of climate change. So it's been something that's been in the works for a long time, and some countries have started stepping up and putting money forward for it, but it didn't come through and reach the international level that it needed to at this COP. So there was some progress, but definitely not enough. And many people, especially those in the global south that are already feeling the effects, are quite frustrated that yet again this agreement couldn't be brought forward, as it's a fund for those that are already feeling the effects to help them rebuild the loss and damage that they've felt. So I think the loss and damage, the phase down of fossil fuels in 1.5 are definitely some of the biggest disappointments, although there were some small steps forward.
Wow. Yeah, so many ups and downs. And taking inventory of all that, I think, is really important for you both, for being involved, but also for the rest of the world, and to get that firsthand look and more of a anecdotal type of rundown of what happened there, more of a personal experience, I just think is really important, because a lot of times we only see what's being portrayed in the media. So thank you both so much for sharing that and for sharing your experiences. I'd just like to ask quickly, do you have anything to add on to where different countries are at after COP26, including Canada and the UK, in England, in terms of climate action and targets? Is there anything else you'd like to add just before we move on?
Yes, please. The UK, I could talk to you for hours about how frustrated I am with the UK. So the UK hosted COP this year, as we all know. They were the presidency. They were the big wigs. They were the ones that were taking all of the like praise for what happens at COP. What very little happened at COP, but what happened at COP nonetheless. And yet the UK was really not doing very good things. The UK are very good at pretending like they're doing the good things, and pretending like they are being the leaders of the future and being the ones that people can follow. And when you actually look at what they're doing, it has a very different picture. We have something here. It's like an offshore oil field. It's called the Cambo oil field. It's off the coast of Scotland. So like COP was like here, and the oil field was like literally here. It was really, really close by. And the UK government, in tandem at the same time as saying, we need to stop offshore oil and gas projects. We need to phase out all of these fossil fuel projects. We need to stop subsidizing this. We need to be doing X, Y, and Z and stopping all of these fossil fuels. We're literally building an oil field a couple of miles away. And that was really the overriding message of COP for me. It was that countries can say whatever they want and they still probably won't follow it. Like there are so many pledges. The UK has made so many pledges and they are not on track to meet a single one. Their NDC, you know what I was saying earlier, they're nationally determined contributions. They're like things that each country are going to do to like meet their little net zero targets or their little climate emergency declarations or whatever. The UK is not on track to meet its NDC, and its NDC is still really far below what we need. It's still really, really far away from anything that's going to make up for the historic issue. I've literally forgotten how to speak. The historic contributions to pollution and to climate change and to the climate crisis. We have made as a country such a massive dent in how the climate crisis has come to play. And our NDC and the way that we hosted COP was absolutely not enough, considering that we did not do well as a country. And I think, yeah, it weren't great. we are not doing very well. We made a lot of pledges and a lot of promises and not very many implementations and not very many actual things to show for it. We were a lot of words, a lot of blah, 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 and a lot of nothing else.
Sounds like a recurring theme. Thank you so much, Phoebe. And Malika, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think similar in terms of the UK. Canada, makes a lot of pledges, but I think we are lacking kind of those implementation and actually seeing them being put into play. And yeah, I'm sure many people on this call have been looking into Canada's pledges and announcements at COP even more than I have, because I've been in different events and haven't necessarily been able to follow all of them. But Canada did make some new announcements, including in terms of zero emission cars or trucks and buses. So there was an announcement about that by the transport minister. Yeah, and some new announcements, including on stopping international fossil fuel kind of investing in fossil fuels internationally or foreign investments. But I think when we think about that, it's just kind of moving the blame elsewhere, right? I heard a lot of people talking about COP like, okay, so they're going to stop doing it internationally, but they're still doing it at home, right? So if every country is still doing it at home, what difference does it make if they're going to stop, right? Like, yes, it's a good step, but we're still investing in the Trans Mountain Pipeline. We're still investing in fossil fuels at home. So I think seeing these new pledges can be nice for some of the different areas that they're representing, but I think we're still burning fossil fuels. Our targets are still far off and we're still not reaching them. And we're really just lacking the implementation. So I think, yeah, it was nice. The transport one could be good. And there were some other pledges, of course, that Canada made. But I think it comes down to action and when it's going to be taken and if it's going to be at home in Canada as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I would like to know, you already talked about this earlier, but how do you think youth influenced COP26? I want to hear about some of the other activities that you were taking part of outside of COP26. Phoebe, did you want to start?
Could you repeat the question? My headphones are completely dying on me.
No problem at all. It was just about how do you think youth influenced COP26?
I think young people set the agenda for this event in so many ways. We would not, what I've seen a lot of people say is that, I can hear you now, hang on. What I've seen a lot of people say is that the stuff that we saw at COP, the commitments that we had was something that we could have fathomed like 3 years ago, something 4 years ago. And I think that, I mean, we're not there yet. We're absolutely not there yet, and we need so much more. But I think that ambition and that urgency is absolutely not only down to young people, also down to the Indigenous communities that are campaigning for this and that are sharing their experiences and having to be vulnerable in a way that they shouldn't have to. But I think the youth outside of that centre set the tone for the people going in, not only during that 2 weeks, but also before it. Like, we had mock COP26 in the time that COP should have been held. We had all of the school strikes. We've seen this massive wave of momentum, and just, we've gotten to a point now that the BBC here in the UK, the big like news coordination, what's the word? Corporation, that's the word. They have now, instead of COVID-19, because the pandemic is like leveled down in the UK, instead of COVID-19 as one of the like points on their webpage, like the little things at the top, they have climate crisis, they have climate change. And I think that's just the most poignant thing I've ever seen. That's what we have done in the last couple of years, to a point where climate crisis is at the top of the news agenda. It's literally a top tab on the main page of the main broadcasting company in the UK. And that's what has happened over the last couple of years. And that is absolutely down to the ambition that campaigners have put in place. And that's why when we say the real leadership isn't on the inside of those conference walls, it's on the outside. It's the people, not only the people that were privileged enough, lucky enough to be in Glasgow, it's the people that are organizing on the grassroots level. You know, it's the people that are building that momentum and building those changes. They are the real leaders, not only because they can speak and be emotional and do all of those kinds of things, the way that young people are normally included, you know, just to inspire the adults. It's not only that inspiration that makes us the leaders, it's the fact that we are leading in our own communities. It's the fact that we are experts. So it's the fact that not only on our experiences and on how it feels to be a young person who's going to have to grow up with this and is already dealing with this. It's experts in policy. It's experts in like the geography and the science side of it. It's young people are coming through as leaders in a way that I don't think we have ever seen. And I think that has shaped the ambition of COP26 this year, and the ambition that will follow. We had, as an example, both Malika and I helped organize through Mock COP and that kind of platform, a climate education event. It was like this like ministerial summit. We brought together all of these like education environment ministers to come together at COP and like talk about climate education for young people. And that would not have happened if it wasn't for young campaigners. We had 23 countries making pledges for climate education in their countries. Absolutely incredible, absolutely amazing. And that would not have happened if it wasn't for, I mean, not just me and Malika, because it's much bigger than us. It's the people that have been campaigning for this and drawing attention to this for years, not only young people, but also teachers' unions, also people that have experienced this in their youth and have grown up and thought, oh, yeah, I was not prepared for that crisis whatsoever and are now campaigning for it. It's people on the ground and people from like the bottom up can influence that policy in a way that I don't think they can even fathom. It propels so quickly from people noticing an issue, speaking out about an issue, starting to get their little megaphone out and speaking about the issue, and then bringing that to those people, like literally standing outside of those town halls and outside of those conference centers and directly telling them what the issues are. And that it sets the tone. It makes sure that leaders know that they can't get away with it. And as like I was saying earlier, that we are watching them. We are literally stood outside watching them, or stood in those rooms watching them. We will not take anything below what is going to safeguard justice for our generation and for so many other people around the world. Yeah, I think young people are amazing. Young people are leaders, and young people have set the tone. Young people are really good.
Yeah, thank you so much. Youth are very powerful. And that's going out to youth leadership and sustainability class. So I'd like to open up the floor now for a brief question and answer period, and then we'll have a few minutes for closing remarks. So we have about 5 to 10 minutes. Just letting everybody know it's almost 12:50. Okay, does anybody have any questions? If you do, feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself, and we would love to hear from you. So any questions for the panelists? Cheryl, would you like to go first?
Thank you. I've put my question in the chat. The question is, Malika and Phoebe, what is the biggest question you came away with?
Sure. Yeah, I guess I can start. Thank you, Cheryl. Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of questions that I've come away with for sure, leaving COP and being in that space. And I think just kind of reflecting on who are the leaders and what kind of action are they taking and who are they taking it for? Being in those spaces and seeing all kinds of nations speaking, but then seeing whose voices are heard. I think it's really reflecting on whose voices are heard and valued most in these spaces, and how does that reflect kind of what we need to see.
Thank you so much. Our next question is coming from Youth Leadership and Sustainability. You have the floor.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you guys noticed a difference following COP26 in the media versus being there in person. And sort of something.
Okay. Sorry.
We got some feedback issues here. Just 1 second. Sorry about that. We've got two computers going. The question was, Ewan was asking if you've noticed a difference in terms of what was actually happening on the ground versus what was being reported back in the media, perhaps at home. And I'm not sure how much you had a sense of that, but that's what he was wondering.
Phoebe, did you want to take this one, or Malika? It's up to you both.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, what has been amazing is that the gap has been closing. We've seen a lot more of the COP coverage, a lot more of the climate policy coverage, a lot more of the kind of like boring stuff, the black and white policy stuff, covering things like climate justice and kind of having an umbrella constantly over climate policy of this is what they promised at Paris, this is what they need, this is what science says that we need, this is what the IPCC says that we need. That's the like intergovernmental panel body thing that like does the 1.5 degree targets and like does the science stuff. It has that constantly overarching. But I mean, that's also me saying that from the UK, from the presidency country, we're always going to have that. But I think it's changed a lot in the last year. During COP, I think there was more of a focus on the civil society than there was on the actual negotiations. We've kind of gone from one extreme to the other. It was really weird. I was talking to someone earlier today and they're like, I don't actually know what happened at the end of COP. And I was like, yeah, they didn't really actually report it. They just kind of reported like that it was happening and like all of these different little things, which is amazing. But they didn't actually report on this government is promising this. They said this 2 years ago, and now they're doing this, and now they're actually implementing this, and all of that kind of thing. We're getting some of that coverage, but not all of that coverage. I think that's the divide that I see right now. I think post COP, there's kind of it's been a bit of a like deflated balloon after COP. Like we had so much momentum on the run up to COP. During COP, it was so much of a like bang. And I think now we are kind of like, and it's like the news coverage here in the UK is like slowly going back to normal and slowly not really talking about climate change and slowly like losing that. Even the science, it's losing the science, so it's even more so losing the climate justice. It's even more so losing the kind of climate stories, the Indigenous people talking about their experiences, the Global South young people talking, the young people in general talking about their experiences. It's losing that edge, I think, now. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
Yeah, thank you so much. That was wonderful. So we have about 6 minutes left. I think this is a good time to start our closing remarks. So first of all, I'd just like to thank Malika and Phoebe for joining us. It was really amazing to connect with you both, especially since you're both across the world from where I am here in Okojiwanong right now. You're both very inspiring, and thank you so much for sharing everything with us today. I'd like to ask quickly if everybody is comfortable, I'd like to take a group shot. So just, it'll be gallery mode. So if you'd like to turn on your cameras, if you'd like to be a part of it, I'm just going to take a quick screenshot just to have the memories. There you all are. This is great. Good to see you all. Okay, I'm going to take it right now. I think that worked. Thank you so much. And you'll probably see that on social media as well. And also, I'd like to mention that on November 20th, so this Saturday, is the Trans Day of Remembrance. And there is an event being hosted by Peterborough Pride, Parn, Transpeer Outreach, and Quick is also involved with this, is supporting this event as well. So this is, please join members of the local trans non-binary community for Trans Day of Remembrance as we reflect on and gain feedback on current services. And I'm going to post the registration link for anyone who's interested. So this is an online event. And since we have a couple of minutes left, I would just like to ask the participants, what comes next for you? What are your plans? And how can we all inspire youth to take part in climate activism? So you can choose to answer one of those questions or both, and just a couple minutes for each, please. So I would love to hear that from both of you, just with some closing remarks and anything else you'd like to share. So Phoebe, let's start with you.
What comes next for young people? I think what I said in the chat is like absolutely what I think. It's what comes next. I mean, what comes next on a global scale is who knows on the politics scale. I have no idea. We're going to be building up to COP27 in Egypt is what we're going to be doing. But I think what I'm going to be doing is working in my community. When I came away from COP, I was very surprised. I was exhausted, but I came back on that train and I was like, energized and wanting to go back into my community and wanting to go and do things and wanting to go and talk to people and wanting to spread the word more. And I think that's what I'm going to be doing for the next year. It's going to be, you can't do anything unless you work from the bottom up. You can't, you need to bring everybody along with you. There's no point. Well, you know, we say about youth engagement, but the young people that we engage are the same young people. They're the same types of young people. They're the people that are already engaged. They're the people that have the private education that's going to be able to like give them the climate education that we need. It's not young people from, I don't know what you call it. We call it from like state schools, from like state funded schools. It's not going to be young people from lower income backgrounds. It's not going to be young people from non-English speaking backgrounds. It's not going to be young people from the global south. we need to bring everybody along with us. And that means young people in our communities that aren't being listened to, and making sure that they understand what's happening and can. I think when you see those massive headlines in the news, it can be absolutely terrifying. So making sure that they have the knowledge, the skills, the everything to be able to comprehend what's going on, to be able to understand what's going on. And also that they can turn that then into action, and that they can become a part of the future generation that are going to tackle this, because that's the only way we're ever going to get anywhere. So yeah, community organizing.
Yes, thank you so much. And Malika, what about you?
Yeah, I totally agree with Phoebe. I think just taking that energy and that momentum that we had leading up to COP and taking it back into the community, taking it back to Peterborough and figuring out what's next locally, and what's next on an international scale too. I think, yeah, like I think a lot of activists and the global movements will just kind of be resetting after this and figuring out what's next. Where's the attention needed after this? But I think that the youth are going to come back strong and find whatever it is next to focus on. But yeah, I think local organizing is super important. So I'm excited to get back. We'll keep organizing strikes and doing whatever we can at the local level as well. Yeah, I think it's just really about seeing the power that the people have, especially in attending these events, and seeing the mass number of people on the outside and the difference that they can make when they come together, the actions that happened inside and outside. So I think my main message is that like everyone is needed, and everyone has a voice, because it's really the people power, and the real leaders are the people in the streets and the people taking action locally or nationally or internationally. So I'm excited to get back to work and keep organizing with all of you.
And we're so excited to have you back here at Quick. Phoebe, hopefully you can visit one day. I'd love to meet you in person as well. And I'm so happy that you both got to connect over there. And it was just so grateful to hear about your experiences. I'm so grateful for you both joining us today. So thank you everyone so much. That ends our event. Please keep your ears and eyes open for future events with Quick. You can connect with us through our newsletter and our website, and always feel free to reach out anytime. So thank you all so much for being here today, and please enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.